Well, welcome to another edition of Frankly, a hard look at America's soft spots, targets, whatever you look at it today. Frank Figliuzzi, a former assistant director of the FBI, MSNBC contributor, and best-selling author of Long Haul. You got to check it out. I'll tell you a little bit about that later on. I'm Chip Franklin. We are coasting through this summer. Anything but coasting. There seems to be a lot on a lot of people's minds. Some of it. I mean, do you ever stop to yourself and think, maybe I think this too much and maybe it's not really happening what I fear? I mean, how as a professional in the world of keeping us safe, how do you ascertain what's real and what's not?
Wow, what a great question. That's funny because I just gave a speech yesterday on this very topic, and it caused some soul searching amongst within me, because the worst thing an analyst can do, and I am a professional threat and risk analyst, is to buy into their own theories and then stick to them to the exclusion of all else, right? So I'm constantly rethinking and evaluating and questioning my own conclusions, and conclusions are dangerous in themselves in the analysis business. So what I do is I try to take in a large volume of data and information from across the spectrum of sources. I also try to keep reading history. And in preparation for the speech I gave on this very topic, I looked to, there's a great piece in the New Yorker this month's edition of the New Yorker magazine. The title is, "Are We Doomed?" And so I had to grab this off the magazine shelf in the airport, right? Are we doomed? And not to belabor the point, but one of my takeaways from this was, it's really not helpful to think that you are living in an absolutely unprecedented, never before dangerous part of history. And because what it causes is fear and panic and often inaction and kind of a fatalistic woe is me approach that prevents you from taking action. And so we've got to remember that other perceptions are out there, and at our own peril, we ignore those other perceptions. And isn't that what we're doing in America right now? Yes, democracy is in peril, but are we really studying the other side of this coin? And so to answer your question in a very roundabout way, I just keep listening, taking in a volume of information, and deciding whether I can really see another angle here.
Yeah. So our first guest, I think, is well suited to look into this and answer that. And he's an author, and he comes from Hollywood. He's a Hollywood legacy family, but that's not fair because he's a lot more. And before I bring him in, I remember growing up as a kid reading 1984, and I remember it being explained to me. And I didn't have to be, after a while, I read it 3 or 4 times, and I realized the most frightening part of 1984 was not the Orwellian world that was created. It was the protagonist. The last line was, he fought Big Brother his entire life, but the last line of the book is, "I love Big Brother." And I feel like that's where we are right now. Our guest is Max Brooks. He's not only an author and an actor, but he looks deep into this stuff. His book, World War Z, was read and discussed by the chairman of the Joint Chiefs of Staffs, and he's been invited to speak at a variety of military functions and engagements, Naval War College, to the FEMA hurricane drill in San Antonio, and many war game scenarios. And good news for him, and we'll bring him in and talk about it, is that World War Z is now in its 63rd printing after 20 years. Congratulations, Max. That's great stuff.
Wow.
Thanks, Chip.
And I know that Long Haul is, and he's thinking 63 printings. That would be great,
Yeah. I thought 3 printings in 3 weeks was good, but wow. Yeah.
So for people who don't know, that maybe just saw the movie World War Z, starring Brad Pitt, it worked on 2 levels. Obviously, it was a zombie movie, but looking at it, it gave us an idea of how we should be prepared in scenarios that are not exactly the same as the zombie invasion, but have fear and have angst and have panic as it all sets in. Why did you write that? And what have you learned since then? And why is the military interested?
I write about, most of the time, fictional threats. Not always. The short story that I just had come out, Tiger Chair, is about what would happen if the Chinese People's Liberation Army invaded the United States. So that's a very real threat. But most of the time, my threats tend to be fictional. But the solutions are not. I never have, a hero come out of nowhere or some magical science fiction solution. It's all real. Because my hero growing up was Tom Clancy, and he always felt that the real world was much more interesting than anything, James Bond's Q could invent. So I became a.
By the way, kudos for Prime and the Jack Ryan series. I think they're true to Clancy's vision, right? Would you agree?
Yeah. I think what Clancy always tried to do was show us that there are real systems in place that keep us safe. And that's what I became a student of. How do we sleep well at night? People like Frank, this army of sheepdogs that keep us as sheep, safe in the pen. But what I learned is exactly what Frank said, which is if you go hardcore doom and gloom, you trigger the ego defense mechanism. It's the same way that we have nerves in our fingers that if you touch the stove, you go, ah. It's the same way our brain reacts to things that are too scary. We tune out. It's funny. My son has been saying this for years in high school and junior high about the environmental crisis. He said, I've got these teachers who are so doom and gloom. And he goes, and I watch the other kids just zone out because it's too scary instead of actually focusing on the solutions. Because no matter what a problem is, we are never doomed. That is not how it works. There are always solutions. And if we focus on those, it triggers the dopamine, it triggers the hope, and we actually start working on what we can do. And great leaders throughout time have always done this.
Every crisis is an opportunity, kind of.
Exactly. Churchill, FDR, they didn't say, oh boy, here we go. They said, no, don't just pray, hug your kids, and go to the mall. There are many ways we can solve this, and here's the part you can play.
Chip, this is what Max is saying resonates so well in so many ways. Here we are taping this. We've had our first presidential debate, and we've seen an immediate response that sounds a lot like what Max was just talking about, which is, oh my God, we've got to do something different. Some new savior has to swoop in, Deus ex machina, and save us. And we seem to be, by the way, this is uniquely human. We just abandon whatever systems we have in place, throw up our hands and go, we've got to find somebody else or some other way to do this. I write about that in my first book, the FBI Way, when I said, I was on-scene commander for the first anthrax murder in history. And people were saying, oh my God, we've never seen this before. We've never been in a hazmat environment to collect microscopic spores of evidence. And I said, hold on a minute. Is this a crime scene? Yes. Is it a murder scene? Yes. Are we hazmat trained? Yes. Okay. So it's a hazmat crime scene. Get to work, right? And same thing with the response to the debate, same thing with the larger response to where we are as a society right now. And this idea that there are mechanisms in place if we'll simply take a breath and double down on those mechanisms.
Right. And I'd like to say I was on the other side of the anthrax scare because I literally received the envelope at my workplace at 30 Rock.
I had no idea.
Yeah, I was a brand new writer on Saturday Night Live, and we had the anthrax letters at NBC News, a few floors downstairs. And it was fascinating to see how people reacted because I think what I do, it shaped who I am as a writer because I study the problem. And in studying the problem, it's like seeing the shark in Jaws. Once you get to see it, you know what you're dealing with. Because I knew about anthrax, I studied anthrax, and I thought, oh, okay, it's not a boogeyman. There's actually ways to solve it, as opposed to the people I worked with who'd never even heard of anthrax. Yeah, and exactly. Suddenly it was just white death in a powder form. Yeah, so all we have to do is get comfortable and familiar with the problem, and then we can start working back to how do we solve it.
Do you think that, when we talk about obviously moving outside our political troubles and looking around the world. I remember reading as a kid James Clavell's book, and especially Noble House.
Oh,
And
yeah.
yeah, and I was always impressed with the concept that China was predictable and that they were very business, oriented, and that in fact they have a word that means Joss, I think is the word, which means good luck in business.
Mhm.
And I never worried about them because it seemed to me they had way too much to lose. Because I mean, in any kind, even with Taiwan, because we're their customers. Why would you want to hurt your customer, right? Russia, on the other hand, in the Middle East, Russia's history is convoluted and long, and the Middle East is the same, a little hard. There's so many different players. When you look around right now, which causes you the most consternation and worry? I mean, I know you just wrote something about China.
Yeah. I mean, China worries me if they're backed into a corner. What also worries me is miscalculation. The whole point of the short story Tiger Chair is that they miscalculated, sort of in a World War I situation where they thought, well, this would be a quick, easy war, and the way Putin miscalculated Ukraine. And autocracies scare me because when you have power concentrated at the top and the advisors are just yes men, then you can really have miscalculation. There are no checks and balances in that way. And all that power can suddenly go in the wrong direction. And I think, unfortunately, when we talk about solutions, like when it comes to China or Putin, as a good liberal, as someone who's always trying to be a dove, it's hard for me psychologically to admit that there are times when you do have to show strength and force. By the way, it's the same thing that Trump always says. You got to show strength, because that's all he thinks. And that's all these people think. They don't see the world in right and wrong. They see weak and strong. And if you do show force and consequence and come out and say, oh, no, you put your hand over the line, I'm going to chop it off, and here's the knife. They go, oh, all right, consequence.
So your interaction with the DOD intrigues me because I come out of 25 years in a giant bureaucracy.
Yeah.
The FBI, bureaucracy is literally the FBI's middle name. And so tell us about, what you see from the outside looking in as to the ability to be creative in problem solving, think outside the box. Or is it more you don't have to, in writing World War Z, was it that you really didn't have to think outside the box because you had history to tell you and predict what was going to happen?
Yes, history was always my guide. I mean, everything that happened in World War Z has already happened. I just put zombies in it. What I found in DOD is a lack of creativity, but not for the reasons you would think. It's not that there aren't creative people there. There's plenty of creative people. I've heard some amazing ideas. What I found was a lack of courage to champion that creativity, particularly in the uniformed services, in the armed forces, where if you have one misstep, you'll get passed over for promotion. And once you get passed over once, your career is basically over. It will stagnate. You'll never get the star. And so where some people come in and they say, oh, no, you've got to bring in more creative types, like me. I say, no. You've just got to champion the creativity. And part of that is the winner's disease. And I found that it all goes back to the worst war we ever fought, which is Desert Storm. We fought this big, massive, mechanized war, fighting it the way we like to fight, the way we're good at fighting. And it worked. And so we thought, well, let's just keep doing that. The problem is what we taught our enemies after Desert Storm was don't challenge America in the way they like to fight. Find other ways. So they're a generation ahead of us as far as, cyber, information, economics, every asymmetric way to fight. They've been experimenting and also figuring out how to weave them into a doctrine. So we need to break this down. We need to get really creative. And we also need to have the courage to get behind people who want to try something, even if they fail. You need to say, okay, good for you. It's the same way on the battlefield when a soldier jumps on a grenade and gets himself blown up for his friends. People don't go, Jesus, what a dumbass. They go, wow.
Well, somebody does.
Yeah. Well, somebody running for president does.
Yeah.
But the soldiers around him or her say, that's a hero. And that needs to be the same way in the meeting. when somebody raises their hand and presents what could be a horrifically dumb idea, but a brave idea, people need to say, I stand with that. And let's give it a try. And if it doesn't work, so what? We'll keep trying until we get it right.
Really important. We saw this, of course, in the U.S. intel community in the lead up to 9/11. We've got all this chatter going on. It's constant chatter. Something horrible is going to happen. And here comes FBI Minneapolis, FBI Phoenix, saying to headquarters, we got guys just learn flight lessons. They only want to learn how to take off. And,
Not the land.
And headquarters is like, leave us alone. And it's that lack of ability to champion creativity or think creatively that literally blew up in our faces.
Yeah.
Max, you said something about you study history, and and of course, there's many old sayings that support that, obviously. But I think of what's happening right now. I just reread Eric Larson's book about the rise of the Third Reich, and just what's happening right now. I want to say, I can't remember the title, Garden of Evil or something along that. Eric Larson, Eric with a K, check it out. But it's a family that went over there and at the beginning of the 30s and watched what happened. And damn if it doesn't sound like what's happening in this country. And I know that's obviously so much has changed in 190 years, but nonetheless, there are a lot of lessons to be learned. And I think one of the things that you said about strength, sometimes strength is not doing anything and refraining from doing the thing that you feel like you have to do, that is justice. But justice moves in sometimes odd ways. It's like a aircraft carrier. You can't just ramp it up. It's got to get to where it gets to. What is the Martin Luther King saying about the arc of justice? It takes a while sometimes. But how do we teach people patience?
I think what I have found, sort of when I have given talks with the military, is psychologically people don't ever want to feel like they're in uncharted waters. That scares them. That turns them off. If you can use an example from history, if you can say, listen, we can do this because it's already done and it worked, that tends to buck people up and get them excited, or at least calm them down. Like, for example, we talk about restraint. When we talk about reacting to terrorism, India has done a great job with that, where Pakistan pretty much all the time keeps sending terrorists into their country. And every one of those could be a pretext for World War III. And India just says, no, we're not going to blow up everything because you keep poking us. Bring it on. You keep sending them here. We're going to send them to heaven, but we're not going to nuke you. Because that's what you want. You want a big confrontation. You want to provoke us. We're not going to be provoked. So that takes a tremendous amount of strength.
What do you make of Putin's nuclear threats?
I think they're dangerous, but I do think that when it comes to him rattling the saber, that's what he wants. And I think that we've got it all wrong, where World War III is not the threat if we stand up to him. World War III is the threat if we appease him. I just got back from a trip to NATO. And the fear with NATO is if he wins in Ukraine, which was such a horrible miscalculation, he might miscalculate again. He may think, well, maybe I can blitzkrieg into Latvia, Estonia, Lithuania really fast, get in there before NATO can react. And if he does that, that's a miscalculation, which could trigger Article 5, which could spin out of control into a nuclear World War III. So the danger is not fighting back. The danger is not fighting back.
Right. Of course, the question is, why would he do those things? How does it really benefit Russia?
Yeah. Well, part of it in his mind is desperation. He's also sacrificing his future. I mean, these are sort of the big picture things we don't talk about, which is the average age of the average Russian is 52 years old. That it is a dying civilization. They're not making babies. And the people who are running the country, I don't mean the government, I mean the people who, make sure the toilet's flush and the light stays on, the roads are paved. The civil servants are my age or older. They're aging out. And not only are there not enough people to replace them, but the 18-year-olds who should be going to school to replace them are dying in Ukraine right now. So he is literally sacrificing the future of his country. At the same time, the Chinese are saying, wow, you've got a lot of delicious resources over there, Siberia.
Yeah.
Oil and gold and water. Oh, we have a water crisis, and there's Lake Baikal. We just put a little straw. And I think that Putin is getting very desperate in this way, that he sees himself becoming the vassal of China and is trying to push as hard as he can so that we will cave. And if there was ever a time for resolve, now is the time on our part.
You also, so it's all of that, and in addition, he truly has become, I think, a true believer in his own lunacy. So if you listen to the again, a ludicrous interview by Tucker Carlson, but nonetheless of intelligence value, whenever you hear Putin talk for 2 hours or however long he talked, you get this sense of history in his head that he's justified this as some kind of I'm taking the territory back. You don't understand history. Right. This is ours. This will be my legacy. But in real time, his legacy is they have lost 300,000 troops. He is putting his young men through a meat grinder in Ukraine, and they're getting their ass kicked. He may think he's winning, but when your people are losing their fathers, their brothers, their uncles, their sons, 300,000 of them, he truly is willing to sacrifice just about anything.
Yeah, and the issue with autocracy, like we said, is that there's no checks and balances there. Is that he's surrounded himself with people who kiss his ass, and then he starts believing it, and that happens all throughout history. A friend of mine, Brad Graham, he was the military correspondent for the Washington Post. He was in Argentina in 1982 when Argentina took over the Falkland Islands. The whole world knew Argentina was committing suicide. There's no way you're going to stand up to the British Navy. They're on their way. He was there at the meeting of the junta, the military junta, who answered to nobody. And nobody was telling them, oh my God, you're in a lot of trouble. And he said, I knew we were in trouble when they were serving scotch at 10 o'clock in the morning.
So speaking of surrounding yourself with people who say nothing but yes, this brings us to Donald J. Trump.
Yeah.
And what his administration looks like if he wins, and his coaching for this debate that really coached him into just lying in response to every answer. Is there any hope there? And by the way, while we're at it, we might as well talk about the people surrounding Biden who said, yeah, this sounds like a good idea, boss. Go ahead and have this debate.
Yeah, no, I don't know who advised him, but that's ridiculous. I mean, that's literally like setting up a skeet shooting match when you're rooting for the skeet. It didn't make any sense. Well, but yeah.
I mean, no, but I mean, that is not Biden's strong point. No. Trump's strong point is obfuscation, to not answer and to lie. And which he did, and I think I read 47 times in the first 30 minutes. Right. And I look at what again, I back to our original point here. I don't think this thing is anywhere near over. I think that there's a lot of time, and I don't know what, I mean, I saw Steve Schmidt. He's been writing every day how we should replace Biden. And, whenever I hear Schmidt say that, I think of two words, Sarah Palin. All right. Yeah. So I think that there's obviously, concern, but I think that, and I can't remember who said this, but Mark Cuban, he said, I'm not voting for Biden. I'm voting for democracy. Yeah. And I'm voting. Yeah. Right. And so you might've just said too at the beginning of this thing. Yeah. And I think that's the message we have to start getting out, that, again, going back to Eric Larson's book, you see this transformation of people. And I was walking my dog this morning, and my wife and I, of course, just depressed, but trying to, get ourselves to it. And it occurred to me, that there's comfort in just picking the winner and staying with that person, even if you disagree with them, because you don't have to worry anymore. And it takes a load off a lot of people's minds. And Trump answers these questions. You talk about strength. I mean, you couldn't pick a worse person in the world to talk about strength. He has none, right? No. He's a bully that surrounds himself with people who are afraid, and they do his work for him. Back to your concept of looking backward to see forward. What can we learn? And I'm not asking you to predict anything, but what's your sense of what's going to happen over the next few weeks?
I think anybody who predicts the future with any certainty, certainly nowadays, is either a liar or an idiot. So I have no idea, but I can tell you that I think the failure of last night was not Biden. It was our reaction to Biden, because the other side is very clear that they're not voting for Donald Trump. They're voting for the world they want to live in. And even if they despise him as a man, they know that if he wins, they get to live in the world that they want. We don't do that. We get afraid, we try to see all sides, and we defeat ourselves instead of saying, no, no, no. If I want to live in the world that Biden is fighting for, I need to fight for Biden, because the other side will vote for Donald Trump's dirty diapers if those dirty diapers bring them the world they want to live in. And that just needs to be us. If we can learn anything from the other side, is that sometimes you get what you get, you don't get upset, and you stick with it and you fight. The greatest presidents we've ever had were in a wheelchair, and also, and JFK, who we all thought he was great, but now we know the man could barely stand up straight. He was a broken, sickly, damaged human being. And now we know that, and look what he did. Lyndon Johnson, the job killed him later on. He literally got cancer from the fact that he was working so hard. And I think there's another way of looking at this. People say, well, Biden is old and tired. Yes, because he's working every day for the world we want to live in. Good. Be old and tired. That means you're working hard. If you're well rested and look energetic, then what are you doing?
You're playing golf is what you're doing. And,
right.
And that's what we heard last night was a debate over who's the better golfer, which really devolved into complete lunacy. But that's what we're doing. If you play golf every day, you look great. And, and you're not governing, but you're golfing.
I don't think we have a conversation like this without me bringing up Michael Lewis as the fifth risk. And one of the things that really worries me, Frank, is what he'll do to the FBI and to our intelligence agencies should he become president. I'm really anxious to see how the Supreme Court looks at immunity moving forward.
Aren't we all?
Huge cases coming up, and I'm wondering if a sobriety is beginning to sink into many of these people's minds who thought they had the leeway to allow things to move in a direction that made them comfortable, and now realize maybe the momentum might take it a lot further than they ever anticipated. I saw Sotomayor going after the conservative end in the court the other day. Unusual to hear that happen. Obviously, there's some concern. I see we had Adam Kinzinger on the show, and one of the things Adam said I found was interesting when he said that, don't talk about the dark world you worry about. Tell people who Trump really is. He's a coward. If you can convince his base that this guy is who he is and not talk about this boogeyman, then you're going to do have a lot more impact in their lives in the base that worships him. I don't know if you're going to stop him from voting, but it does make sense that we're creating this boogeyman for a guy that, wears spray tan and diapers.
Yeah. I think that really it's all on us. It's on us as the voters. It's on us to talk to our friends who are thinking of not voting, who are thinking of sitting this one out, or don't like Biden as a person, or maybe don't like one of his 150 policies. We all need to get out and vote, and we need to do our part. We need to stand behind him because we outnumber the other side. We always have. But through our own internal divisions, through our apathy, through our fear, they continually win. I mean, when you talk about history, that's been the case my entire life. I'm 52. And my life began watching Ted Kennedy split the Democratic Party, with Jimmy Carter. And Ronald Reagan just roared into the gap. Then I watched Ralph Nader.
Coincidentally, inflation was the issue then too, as it is today. Right. Yeah.
And the fact that Ted Kennedy also thought Jimmy Carter was too far to the right.
Yeah.
I watched Ralph Nader split the Democrats with Al Gore, and then George Bush won. I watched Bernie split the Democrats and then I watched Trump won. It's always our internal divisions. You know, if we can all just stand together and realize, look, this guy's not perfect. What he's doing may not be perfect, but oh my God, the alternative. There is a moment when you may not like chemotherapy, but you like testicular cancer less.
I think that the solutions present themselves, and you just have to have your eyes open many times. As you said before, we can't make accurate predictions on what's going to happen. But what we can do is we can have the right attitude when these scenarios avail themselves to us, right?
Yeah, and there is a glimmer of hope here, and I don't know if this is big hope or small hope, but it does exist, which is one of Donald Trump's greatest allies in 2016 was disbelief. You know, was the idea, I'm sure we all knew people who said, well, that would never happen. That could never happen.
Right.
And then there was the disbelief once he got in, remember, of, well, now he's in, and now he's going to grow up. He was campaigning, and now the grown-ups will. There's no more denial. We all know exactly who he is, and we all know exactly what he's going to do. So hopefully that will propel people to make the right choice when they vote.
Can Frank, the FBI and Chris Wray, I know you're not on a day-to-day, but I know you talk to people. What's their sense of what could happen in the next 12 months and how it affect them?
So there is talk about, I mean, it's not good, by the way. There's talk about people, for those who are familiar with government service, particularly federal law enforcement, they have mandatory retirement age because of the toughness of the job. You've got to go at 57, and you can go as early as any age with 25 years of service, which actually applied to me. So you've got this window of people at any given time who can leave with their full pension. And those people are saying, I was going to stick it out and go to mandatory at 57, but I'm out as soon as I'm eligible, because this plan that's being set forth, that, you know, we could have a fascist as head of the FBI, a Trump loyalist as the Attorney General of the United States, but it's much worse than that. What they're talking about is, you know, when they do away with civil service protections for rank and file employees, and all the planning going on that the U.S. attorneys that will turn over, which they all will, the people who make the senior prosecutive decisions throughout our country would have to give a loyalty pledge to Trump. Now go down to the head of every FBI field office, 56 of them in the United States, and say that they're handpicked now, because there is serious talk about putting the FBI under the White House, not under the DOJ. And now you've got Trump loyalists deciding literally which case to open today, right? So if you've got a Russia case, no, declined. I've got a corruption case against a Republican county commissioner, no, declined. So put this throughout the intel community, where they're telling you don't even collect intelligence on this. I don't want to hear it. It's causing issues like people saying, I'll be out as early as I can get out.
I think that if we had, when I talk to people that are Trump enthusiasts, I always I go down the metrics of the economy, and I say, look, here's why what your guy said is wrong. Everything that he says about having the best economy, they weren't there. The numbers weren't there, from GDP to inflation to unemployment. You go right through it. You can see that it's just not true. And obviously, I don't know if social media or the advent of cable or what was the tipping point, but we all experienced it. We all knew there was a period in time in our lives. You know, you don't have to go back to Walter Cronkite. It was in the early 90s. You could, I remember coming home in 97 and turning on AOL and learning that Princess Diana had died. It was the first major event I ever got off the internet. Now I can't tell you the last one I got off television, right? It's all through social media. I don't know how that construct will eventually work its way out. I think it depends on us, but it has changed the way we perceive truth. The way, I remember Roger Rosenblatt wrote after 9/11 that irony is dead. Well, he was wrong, but it's one of the most important things for people to understand, that concept of the unintended consequence of your actions. I mean, history is replete with ironic twists that cost millions of lives. And how we learn that and how we soak that in is so important. But most people can't tell you the difference between coincidence and irony today. And I know it sounds like, a grammatical lesson, but it's not. It's a deep-seated part of the human experience to learn from your mistakes, right? I mean, the Marshall Plan, great idea. We didn't employ it in Afghanistan. 1990 was a great opportunity for us to work with the Russian people and possibly, maybe, I don't know. I mean, I know Biden was pushing for that all through the 90s. Yeah. He was a pain in the ass. He wanted Ukraine to be part of NATO. He thought this was a great opportunity for us to strengthen these countries and build NATO up even more, and even possibly invite Russia into NATO. I mean, we had these opportunities and we missed them. So, what is the opportunity now that we should do that we're missing?
I think right now we're at a moment which has a great opportunity to educate the American people about all these amazing checks and balances that we have put in from 1776 to avoid tyranny. What so many people don't understand is that our government is why our government is so slow, right? And why it is so disorganized. That's not laziness. That's intentional. The whole reason that our bureaucracy is slow and cumbersome and there's arguments is to avoid exactly this. All my friends who've worked in government since the 90s, when I've complained, and they've been like, no, we do that on purpose. We don't want a government that runs so smoothly that if we do get a dictator, he can work it all very quickly and efficiently. So we have all these wonderful kill switches that we put in, but the American people don't understand it. They don't understand what they can do when they vote. So I think that we really need to have a crash course in civics, which, by the way, we should have been doing since the end of the Cold War. But it's not too late. If there was ever a time to educate the American voter, here's why you have the government you have, it's now.
Well, as always, it's, have you ever thought of running for office?
I would, but as much as I am proud to be an American, I'm also happy to be married. And I've had certain threats from someone in the marriage who has been like, no, we're not doing this. You're not, because it's a we, and the we part is not going to happen.
Well, my wife told me to tell you this. She ordered Tiger Chair for me, off Amazon, and it's a short story, which I laughed when I don't know who said this, but it said I would have written less, but I didn't have enough time. I had no time, and because it is, as we all know, it's just one of the. I think it might have been Mark. It sounds like a Mark Twain quote.
Yeah.
But it's you can get it on Amazon, and I never asked you this. How do you put? I read devolution. Is there de-evolution?
Yeah.
Devolution.
It's devolution.
Yeah. Great stuff, Max. Really, please keep it up, and please keep coming back. Your insights are really valuable.
Thank you, guys. It was great. We'll talk soon. You take care.
Take care.
Thanks, Max.
Great guy.
Wow,
so
we could have talked with Max for an hour.
Long time. And it's interesting because what I love about his approach is that he's just a smart guy who his father's if you didn't know this, Mel Brooks, I know you know this, and his mother Anne Bancroft was
unbelievable, right?
Yeah, you talk about Hollywood legacy, but he doesn't rest on anything, and his writing, they challenge you. The book World War Z is a remarkable piece, and you can enjoy it. I meant to say this, Tim, but I'll tell you. I always hated zombies for the same reason. Remember Invasion of the Body Snatcher?
Yeah.
Right. The thing that frightens me about that is really a good psychological trip through my head. The fact that people you used to trust turn on you because they become these monsters, right? Somebody close to you can turn into this monster. And, it's and I love to trust people. I want to trust everybody. In fact, I'm naive in that way. I will, I reach out and I don't think the worst of people. And I'm trying not to do that with people that support, Donald Trump.
I think that what you just described was the rationale for so many people in 2016 to vote for Trump. I talked to so many people who said, I just want somebody from outside the Beltway. I just want a businessman's approach to running the government. Right. And I understood that. I knew too much about Trump and his reputation. And for me, it was all about resume. Look, if you don't know what to do when China and Taiwan start duking it out, I don't need you in the Oval Office. But that was it. It was a trust. There was a trust factor. He seems like a decent guy. I don't know. And now we know. Right. Now we know. And people are still rejecting the safer choice. And when I hear people say, well, I don't know if I can vote for somebody that old, I go, you know what? You know what's old? Democracy. Democracy's old. And you know what? It's worth preserving.
Who was the president that was the isolationist? Was it Wilson or Coolidge? I can't recall. But I know that it played into, the aftermath after the Treaty of Versailles, which, of course, pummeled Germany and created the environment for Hitler to rise. The mistakes that, again, if you don't learn from the past, you're doomed to repeat it, is one of the most accurate descriptions of the human behavior. Yep. I mean, and it's almost, it almost feels like a gravitational pull to these bad things. It's like, that's what happens. If you don't keep running, gravity will suck you in. I mean, the planets that circle, when they slow down, the only thing that keeps them up there is their speed, and their
good point. Good point.
I just wonder about, the lessons that are going to be learned from this. And hopefully, if the worst happens, then we have to get through it and we have to find a way out the other side. But I'm not vulnerable. You're not vulnerable, but there are millions of people in this country that are.
Oh, yeah.
Either economically or, if we try to deport 11 million people, the nightmare that would,
just the thought of spouses being ripped from the arms of Americans because they got here years ago. And now, they're going back to a place in Mexico, wherever, that they barely speak the language. Are you kidding me? Yeah, we're going to see human horror stories happen here. And we will wonder how we all allowed ourselves to get here.
Well, as we said earlier, there's plenty of time, and I think the positive angle of this is that maybe what happened on the last debate was a wake up call as to our vulnerability.
Yeah,
and that we get tougher. And
I'm just reminded of one of our most recent guests and his admonition when we asked him. It was John Heilemann. And we asked him, John, what do you do when people come up to you in the supermarket, basically, and say, I don't know what to do. We're helpless. I don't know what to do. And he says, his answer is, just effing do something. And then he focused on what to do, which was really the 5 swing states, the 5 critical states. Get people registered to vote, volunteer, give some money, but it's all about those 5 states.
Yeah, and I think that people that want something to do, we should be offering. I mean, I said the people in the Democratic Party, the DNC, should be offering a really easy, detailed plan of what you can do. So don't leave it up to people, because politics is like calculus. I mean, it's not easy. I mean, people think it is, but there's everything from money to timing to. I don't know. When I first learned this, in Charlie Wilson's War, there's a scene where he describes he had a neighbor that his dog used to bark. And so he put glass in his food and it killed his dog. But he knew the guy was a local official. So he went and drove black people to the polls who never really voted and got the guy defeated. And he said, that's when I learned to love America. That within our republic, there are avenues to succeed, which are entirely legal and entirely within the framework of our, the founders, that works. It's just, it takes time. It takes energy. Before we go, I got these anecdotes when people know that you and I worked together on this about long haul. But I ran into somebody the other day. I said, can you ask him a question about the FBI way and about, the J. Edgar Hoover shadow, and when it went away? Was it fair to say he had a stranglehold over the FBI, or is that just exaggerated?
Oh, I might go a step further and say you could argue he had a stranglehold over Washington. Yeah.
Yeah. When he left, what did the FBI do to make sure that didn't happen again?
Well, ironically, it wasn't so much what the FBI did, it's what Congress had to do. And so you had the church committees, you had as the bureau's mistakes came forward, with Watergate, for example, with L. Patrick Gray destroying documents, by the way, with the idea that we were unlawfully wiretapping Black Panthers, Martin Luther King, that, it was a whatever it takes to get the job done against the threat mentality. And then you had senior officials like the deputy director that were getting charged with crimes. So here comes Congress holding committees determining that, yes, there were unlawful wiretaps. Yes, there was something called COINTELPRO, counterintelligence program, that was all designed at planting evidence. I mean, the FBI essentially got the Chicago Police Department to kill a Black Panthers leader. And this all eventually came out. And then the rules got put into place, not by the FBI, but by Congress and the DOJ that said, here's what you're going to do for a wiretap. Here's what you're going to do for an undercover operation. Here's when you can develop a source and penetrate an organization. That all came because of J. Edgar Hoover and after his death.
Wow. Yeah, because I was familiar with Bobby Kennedy, who, as Attorney General, wiretapped King, at least according to what I've read, and then moving forward, and you saw that from '68 on with John Mitchell and the Nixon administration, and ironically, it was the bug inside his own office that brought him down. But the whole idea of wiretapping and it occurred to me the Democrats might be able to come forward and say, look, what Trump is proposing is bad, and we know because we did it, and it was wrong, and it can't happen again. And I think there's something to that honesty to say, like, look, this is a lesson we learned firsthand, and that's why we are who we are. You can't do it, right? And sometimes that honesty and that admission really resonates with people.
Yeah, I love this idea, and I'll plead guilty on the fact that I'm not doing that enough on my TV appearances and in my columns. I can speak with authority from what the abuses were in the FBI and say this will happen again when we have a candidate saying he's going to seek retribution. Steve Bannon claiming he's going to come after Andy McCabe. In this debate with Trump saying that Biden could be charged with crimes. What? So yeah, toss the rule book out. New FBI director, new attorney general, who will say, yeah, we're tearing up the attorney general guidelines for investigations, tearing them up, and we will be wiretapping our enemies.
Fair enough. I just got to balance that at the end. In the neighborhood I grew up, my father was Capitol Hill Police, but didn't live with us. But one of my neighbors, my best friend at the time, and still a friend, his dad was FBI agent. And his dad used to tell us, it was amazing. He would say, during the rioting against the Vietnam War, he'd said, it's understandable these kids are rioting. Their friends are going away and not coming back for something that has not been explained to them why adequately. And he was very emotional about it, but we used to call him, his name was Battle was his last name. We used to call him Battle Axe because he was such a hard ass, but he also had the ability to empathize with people that he had to arrest, people that they had to, so, I think that, we have this in our head, the Ephraim Zimbalist Jr. sort of guy. And I think that was the kind of FBI guy I liked. And I think that was my experience with the bureaucracy coming out of, the FBI and Metropolitan and Capitol Hill Police again, this was a long time ago, but it was, yeah, we have to enforce the law, but it doesn't mean we have to be these iconic bad guys. We're American citizens, just like the people that we have to arrest. And there's a way out of this. Not everybody felt that way, obviously. And as we heard with, Mark Esper say, when Trump wanted to shoot the protesters outside of Lafayette Square in the legs, that's what we have to avoid, because I don't
Yeah,
think
that's right. Forget, you can throw empathy out the window and compassionate law enforcement if indeed Trump is going to not just replace an FBI director, but replace like the entire 7th floor at FBI headquarters, and get rid of the career professionals. That's a real concern.
Well, the long haul, get out and buy it. You will love it. It is, again, Frank Figliuzzi's latest, and it details and chronicles, and you did it. You rode in an 18-wheeler for how long?
2,000 miles in a big rig. I rode flatbed, and I dug deeply into 3 subcultures: long haul trucking, sex trafficking victims, and the crime analysts who try to connect the dots to stop the killing. It's in our 3rd printing. I can't compete with 63 printings for Max, but maybe we'll get there. It's being well received.
It's a great, just again, for anybody out there that's a family with truckers, the truckers are the heroes here. They're the ones that want to help stop these serial killers riding in these rigs across the country, taking advantage of people who are weak and lost. And it's a great story that everybody should know, and good stuff, Frank. So keep it up, and we'll keep you up to date on that. Again, thanks to Max Brooks for being with us here on Frank Figliuzzi. You see him on MSNBC, frankfigliuzzi.com. And you can find these where you can listen to this if you're watching this, and you can download this as well. Go to iTunes and check it out. Again, for Frank Figliuzzi, I'm Chip Franklin. Until next time.